Welcome to On the Middle East, the podcast of the award-winning media service Al-Monitor, where each week we talk with the decision makers and thought leaders who are making the news and shaping the trends in the Middle East. I'm Andrew Parasiliti, president of Al-Monitor. And this week, after a few opening remarks, I'll be talking with His Excellency Meshal Al-Thani, Qatar's ambassador to the United States. Ambassador Al-Thani and I will be talking about developments in Qatar and the Gulf, including COVID-19, the prospects for a reconciliation within the GCC, US-Qatar relations, and the World Cup in 2022, which will be held in Qatar. All of that and more after this short break.
Qatar today is stronger than 3 years ago. As a matter of fact, IMF and the World Bank has issued reports stating that Qatar's economies continue to grow and will continue to grow in comparison to the blockading countries' economies. In fact, today Qatar is more resilient, more independent on its food security, for example. We are opening up new trade routes. Qatar is doing extremely well now. Of course, at the beginning of the blockade, as took everyone at a surprise why those countries did these actions, of course, there was an immediate impact that the government has managed very well.
Welcome back to On the Middle East. That's Ambassador Meshal Al-Thani, and I'm going to turn to my conversation with him in just a moment. Like most of you, I'm reading The Room Where It Happened, John Bolton's memoir of his 17 months as President Trump's national security advisor. With regard to the Middle East, there's much to read and talk about in the book, but I would like to focus on one specific event and passage. That is the Trump-Putin summit in Helsinki in July 2018, and what it said and may say about Russia's policy towards Syria. The headlines from that summit, you may recall, were basically two: that Trump met with Putin alone, only with interpreters, none of his staff present, and that at the joint press conference, Trump seemed to accept Putin's denial of meddling in the 2016 elections. Now, as Bolton recounts in his book, for Putin, Syria was at the top of the agenda for Helsinki. Putin had told Bolton and Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu in advance of the summit that he too had concerns about Iran's role in Syria. And of course, that was a top priority for both the United States and for Israel. And that while Russia sought a strong Syrian state, Iran's interests were different and broader and not necessarily aligned with Russia's interests. According to Bolton and Trump, Putin did most of the talking in Helsinki and spent a lot of that time talking about Syria and getting Iran out. Although in all of his conversations before the summit and at the summit, Putin did not want to raise expectations or promise whether he would be able to deliver on that is getting Iran out of Syria. Now, Al-Monitor closely covered the implications and follow-up from Helsinki for diplomacy on Syria, including Putin's often frenetic but ultimately failed efforts to work out some type of deal to prevent Iranian-backed forces and Iranian missiles from threatening Israel. Now, because that didn't work out, Israel has since taken this matter into its own hands, regularly targeting Iranian and Iranian-backed groups and bases in Syria, and I might add, which Israel neither confirms nor denies. With Syria facing the risk of state collapse, probably even more so as a result of the U.S. Caesar sanctions imposed last week, the time may be ripe for another U.S.-Russia conversation about the future of Syria and Iran's role there. U.S. Syria envoy James Jeffrey, in his briefing last week about the Caesar sanctions, spoke of some of the positive steps taken by the Russians on the UN political process and the need for Russia to do more, in addition to the hardship faced by the Syrian people as a chronically failing state in conflict for 9 years now. Both the US and Russia also face a risk if Syria collapses. State collapse in the Middle East is no surefire winner for the US, even when brutal dictators such as Saddam Hussein in Iraq and Muammar al-Gaddafi in Libya are toppled. And as we saw in Iraq, Iran has a comfort level in dealing with states in conflict and is there at times to pick up the pieces, as they could, at least in part, in Syria. The Caesar sanctions may be just the catalyst in addition to the deteriorating situation in Syria to find a so far elusive common ground with Moscow to energize the political track. That seems to be happening, and that's a good thing. Of course, Putin's interest is not the US interest in Syria, and Russia considers its support for Assad and the Syrian state a success. But there are differences between Russia and Iran in Syria, and the time may again be ripe for the US to test Putin on his interest in preventing state collapse. Now to our conversation on Qatar and developments in the Gulf. I am pleased to have with me today His Excellency Meshal Al-Thani. He is Qatar's ambassador to the United States, a position he has held since April 2017. Ambassador Al-Thani has a really distinguished career in Qatar's foreign service, having previously served as ambassador to the United Nations, the European Union, and France. And he is with us today to talk about events in Qatar and the region. Ambassador, welcome to On the Middle East.
Thank you, Andrew. And at the outset, I would like to wish you and your listeners good health, hoping that everyone is trying to stay safe. I also would like to thank you and Al Monitor for hosting me today. I'm looking forward to an open and frank discussion with you.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to have you with us today. Let's get right into it. The Emir and Foreign Minister of Kuwait have been trying to repair the split between Qatar on the one hand and Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Bahrain, and Egypt on the other. Those four countries shut down all trade and transportation with your country back in 2017. I think this was just soon after you came into your job as ambassador to the United States. Where does this mediation effort by Kuwait stand at this time, and how do you see this issue developing?
Andrew, allow me first to just give a background information to your listeners. I am not sure that everyone following your show is probably aware of how this crisis started. I'd like to remind everyone that this crisis started by a hack on the Qatar news agency, a hack that was orchestrated from the blockading countries, claiming that there was a statement by His Highness the Emir of the State of Qatar, and that they have taken a severe position against that statement. A statement that was installed actually into the Qatar news agency, as everyone refers to as fake news. Based on that fake news, and despite the many attempts to explain to our neighbors that this was a hack, at the time we did not know who was orchestrating the hack, they kept ignoring our reach out and saying to us, this is too late. There was a statement that came out. And they have built this aggression against Qatar and the blockade on this aspect of the statement, which is a fake news. And they have continued aggressively against us in every aspect, whether it is economic, political, or even at some point the military aspect. So I think the mediation of the Kuwait, His Highness the Kuwait of Emir, has never stopped. Kuwait is continuing to push for a solution, to bring us all around the table to discuss and find a solution forward. We also appreciate the efforts that the current administration, the administration of the United States here, is also helping to push for a resolution, because it is really counterproductive to everyone's efforts in combating terrorism and addressing the challenges of the region. Unfortunately, we have seen the last attempt by the Emir of Kuwait, the Foreign Minister of Kuwait have visited Qatar. Our minister went back to Kuwait. There was some discussions and attempts by the Kuwaitis to push forward. Unfortunately, the blockading countries continue to push back on any efforts, whether it is by the Americans or by the Kuwaitis. How do I see things moving forward? I think it is about time that those countries come back to their own senses and acknowledge that the only way forward to find a solution is through dialogue. A dialogue that is based on respect for all parties, based on principles, because at the same time, and we do have also concerns that they need to address. So unless we see everyone around the table and that these blockading countries attempts to continue this aggression against Qatar, whether in the media or politically, I think they should realize that all these attempts for the past 3 years are not working, and it's about time to come to the table.
Now, the four countries have put forward a list of grievances that they claim you, Qatar, need to address, including Al Jazeera and Qatar's relationships with the Muslim Brotherhood, among other things. Do you accept that list as a negotiation point, or what do you think those countries need to do before you're willing to talk, or are you willing to talk unconditionally with those countries?
Qatar has always said that we are open to discuss any issue that they have. Now, however, I have to underscore that any discussion has to be based on respect of our sovereignty. Andrew, though the 13 demands were really put together after pressure from the United States, because the United States at that time was really puzzled into why did these countries did this action against Qatar, so they kept pushing for it. So at the end, the blockading countries came up with 13 demands that were made not to be met or will be rejected. So I don't think these 13 demands are demands that they were put for basis of negotiations on purpose by the blockading countries. That's my view. They have claimed that Qatar is supporting every terrorist organization you can think of. Of course, this is false and not true. I think if we look back into history, we know who has been supporting terrorism and who was involved in acts of terrorism. We don't need to go through that, but I think that, again, they should stop blaming, they should stop accusing falsely, stop this information campaign, and really come forward and put real grievances.
One of the key issues in the dispute has been that the UAE, Saudi Arabia, Bahrain, and Egypt have called out Qatar for its ties with the Muslim Brotherhood, which they consider a terrorist organization. How do you respond to these accusations?
I think, first, before I go and answer this question, I truly believe actually that the blockading countries is using this as a pretext in order to sell their grievances to the West. They are accusing Qatar to support the Muslim Brotherhood. This is false. This is not true. Again, I emphasize that this is just a way for blockading countries to convince you here in the West that Qatar is doing something unacceptable. In terms of whether Qatar supports or has engagements with the Muslim Brotherhood, we as the United States, as the United Kingdom, we do not consider the Muslim Brotherhood as a terrorist organization. I think there has been a lot of efforts from the United States, a lot of efforts from the United Kingdom, from European countries to look into this matter, and they have concluded that they do not fit the criteria to be labeled as a terrorist organization. Therefore, Qatar does not consider them a terrorist organization. We are in the same line of thought with the United States and the United Kingdom and our European allies.
Ambassador, tell us what the costs of the blockade have been for Qatar. You talked about trade, the loss of trade. You talked about political consequences. You even mentioned military consequences. How has this all played out in Qatar over the last 3 years?
In terms of economic consequences, I can assure you that Qatar today is stronger than 3 years ago. As a matter of fact, IMF and the World Bank has issued reports stating that Qatar's economies continue to grow and will continue to grow in comparison to the blockading countries' economies. In fact, today Qatar is more resilient, more independent on its food security, for example. We are opening up new trade routes. Qatar is doing extremely well now. Of course, at the beginning of the blockade, as took everyone at surprise why those countries did these actions, of course, there was an immediate impact that the government has managed very well. And today, I can tell you that Qatar is exporting dairy products in comparison to 2017, where it was importing most of its dairy products from Saudi Arabia.
Ambassador, has Qatar's engagement with the Arab League and the Gulf Cooperation Council been affected at all by the dispute with your neighbors?
Qatar's commitment to these two organizations is there. We still attend the meetings. We continue to work through these organizations. Unfortunately, some members who are part of these organizations are really trying to undermine the work of the Gulf Cooperation Council, undermine the work of the Arab League. In terms of the Arab League, I think the Arab League really needs to be looked at and reviewed in terms of reforming the institution. And Qatar has, in many cases, in many occasions, reiterated the importance of reforming the Arab League. I think today the Arab League, as you can see, Andrew, is really lacking the ability to address the challenges in our region. Unfortunately, sometimes it's because of manipulation from certain members. But we are committed to these organizations and we will continue to work through them.
And do GCC meetings continue as well?
GCC meetings continue, some of them, not all of them. I have to say it is a big challenge for us in Qatar to attend these meetings because of, for example, in Saudi Arabia, they will not facilitate our entry to attend these meetings. Sometimes, if they are in a third country, we attend. For example, whether it's in Oman or in Kuwait, our attendance is very easy in comparison with going to one of the blockading countries' meetings.
Let me ask about some of these regional issues. Does Qatar support the Trump administration's peace plan, and how worried are you about the possibility that as soon as next week, Israel may begin to annex some Jewish settlements in the West Bank?
Qatar welcomed the efforts that U.S. administration is taking to find a solution to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. In terms of the reports regarding the possibility of annexation that might be happening next week, the state of Qatar has stated very clearly that this unilateral action is going to undermine the process between the Palestinian and the Israelis. It's also going to violate all the legal agreements that has been signed and been talked about with the Palestinians, and it's going to be on the long run creating some realities that will also put Israel in a difficult situation. So I believe that's something very dangerous, and we call on the Israeli government not to do so.
Ambassador, Qatar has maintained good relations with Iran. Was the decision for the United States to withdraw from the nuclear deal a good idea or a bad idea in your score? And what do you counsel the U.S. and the region on dealing with Iran?
So, Andrew, if I may just give some perspective on the relationship between Qatar and Iran before I answer the question, it's really important for everyone to understand that Qatar shares with Iran the largest gas field, single gas field in the world. So that's an offshore gas field that requires us to make sure we have good communications with Iran on the distribution of this LNG that is coming out from that. Thus, the relation comes between us and Iran as a relation that of necessity that we need to maintain good open communications for that purpose. In terms of the agreement, it is unfortunate that our concerns from the beginning were not taken in consideration in terms of the agreement itself. When I say our concerns, I don't mean only Qatar, but I mean the whole region. Of course, there were some consultations, but at the end, we have not seen certain issues reflected in this agreement. It was an agreement that could have been built on, but the administration decided, as you know, to withdraw we'll see how this is going to unfold.
So you would have preferred that early on there had been a regional dimension to the discussions with Iran, and that might have been a good complement to the nuclear deal.
I would have preferred that from the beginning of the launch of the agreement, that we would have been consulted and we would have advised that there are many issues that should be really included in this agreement, not only the nuclear matter. But unfortunately, this didn't take place. So we really hope that at some point the US and Iran would be able to talk and find a solution to this. The United States has always said it's open to come for the Iranians to discuss this matter. So we'll see how this will unfold.
Ambassador, we talked earlier about how the dispute with the UAE, Saudi Arabia, Bahrain, and Egypt came about within weeks of your taking up the post as ambassador to the United States. And that summer, President Trump even had a tweet where he seemed to take their side against Qatar. But since then, the US-Qatar relationship is restabilized, if not strengthened, in the political, economic, and military realms. Qatar hosts U.S. CENTCOM in the Gulf at El Obeid base. Tell us about the U.S.-Qatar relationship over the past 3 years.
So you are right. I came at the beginning of a challenging period for my country. You see, Andrew, unfortunately, the blockading countries tried to mislead the at the time new coming in administration. They have shared information with them, of course, false information, that the Qataris are doing X and so and so and so. But very soon after, a couple of weeks, the administration realized that there is something wrong here, that what those countries are claiming that Qatar is doing is not true. And then immediately, the administration started to push in favor of reconciliation and a discussion between the blockading countries and Qatar to resolve this rift. And this continues to be the administration's position. They continue to try to push to find ways for the blockading countries to come to the table. Unfortunately, the blockading countries continue to resist. We have seen growing number of initiatives between Qatar and the United States, whether it's the military, as you said, or political coordination, or on the economic aspect. I think one of the success that witnesses this relationship is the strategic dialogue that was signed on 2018. So that's a witness to the strength of the US-Qatar relationship. And we will continue to work with our partners here. I think there is a lot of things we can do together. We appreciate the role of the United States in stabilizing our region, and we'll continue to work with them.
Ambassador, it appears that President Trump has a good, strong personal connection with Sheikh Tamim, the Emir of Qatar. Is that your observation as well?
Yes. Both the President and His Highness enjoy excellent relationship. They consult regularly on many issues, and the President appreciates the role that His Highness and Qatar is playing vis-a-vis helping the United States in advancing a peace process in Afghanistan. So there are many issues that the President and His Highness consult on.
Ambassador, let me turn to COVID-19. As of today, I checked the numbers before our conversation. Qatar has 89,579 cases, but only 99 deaths. That's a fatality ratio of 0.1%, remarkably low. The fatality rate in the United States is about a little over 5%, worldwide about the same. How has Qatar been able to achieve such a low fatality rate with a fairly high number of cases given your relatively small population?
So, Andrew, I think it's due to the early and proactive action from the government, as well as our ample capacity to treat the new cases. I think this is what have enabled us to have a death rate of less than 0.1%. I think also providing the free testing and medical treatment, establishing health centers also helped. We also ensured safe living and working conditions by providing food, water, and protective equipment to our residents and workforce. The government moved quickly also to close schools, non-essential business, public spaces. We also made the wearing of masks mandatory and launched a contact tracing application and required all citizens and residents to install it on their phones to alert them in case an infected person is around them. So I think it's a combination of those factors that helped us to have this result.
I've noticed as well that Qatar has a kind of foreign aid program to assist other countries with COVID-19. Tell us a little about that.
Qatar, we actually responded to that by, for example, helping here in the United States. We have donated thousands of respiratory masks and other medical equipment to several cities, including Miami, New York, Charleston, and LA. We have partnered with the communities through the US to provide in-need students with the resources necessary to continue distance learning. Qatar Airways has transported over 70,000 tons of medical equipment and aid relief worldwide. It has carried over 1 million people stranded abroad back to their home countries, including Americans, and announced it would give away 100,000 free flights to frontline workers across the globe.
We've been covering here at Al Monitor an exodus of expatriate and migrant workers from the Gulf. Has this been the case in Qatar as well? And do you see this complicating the post-COVID-19 economy in Qatar and the region?
I think that it's a challenge not only in Qatar. It's a challenge that all over the world. Not having the cooperation of residents taking their necessary measures to stay safe is going to complicate any government's effort to address this challenge that we are facing. But we all, again, we believe in Qatar that this is a collective challenge that all countries needs to work together to address it.
Let me mention, if I could, the World Cup that's coming up in 2 years. Has the coronavirus affected your planning for the Cup in any way? And what have been the challenges and how are you managing them?
There is no doubt that the COVID-19 pandemic, when it hit, started in the impact to see in March, at least in our region, have slowed down many projects. But I can assure you that a significant number of projects has been already delivered. And we just inaugurated recently a stadium that is part of this infrastructure that was being built specially for the World Cup. As you said, Andrew, it's in 2 years. I think by that time, things are going to be completely different. I was very glad to hear today that we might have a vaccine by December. So hopefully that this is the case, and things are going to go back to normal for not only us in Qatar, but for everyone around the world. And I can assure you Qatar is going to host a wonderful World Cup where the fans will have excellent time and enjoy their experience down there.
Ambassador, do you think because the World Cup is a sport, not a political event, but a sporting event, that will be an opportunity, a potential bridge building opportunity to bring about a reconciliation with your neighbors?
As you said, Andrew, sports brings everyone together. Sports is a bridge, and this is really what Qatar believed in when it started thinking of hosting the World Cup, because we believe that sports brings people together, and we wanted the world to look at the Middle East and our region in a different way. That it's not only conflicts. In terms of this could be a bridge building between the blockading countries and Qatar. I hope by before we reached that date that we would have concluded this rift and found a solution to it. Again, it's the ball in their court. They are the ones who have to come to the table and realize that they've been for the past 3 years trying to convince the world that Qatar is doing something wrong and supporting terrorist factions. And honestly, no one is believing them anymore.
Ambassador, could you comment on the condition of foreign workers in Qatar, including those working on the World Cup, as well as on other projects? How do you assess their condition there, and what is Qatar doing in response to concerns about conditions of those workers?
First of all, Andrew, I would just like to say that we as Qataris are grateful and appreciative to everyone who is in Qatar working with us to develop our country. I would also like to say that as Qataris, as a Qatari, we don't like to see any mishandling or violations in human rights for any of those workers or any expatriates in Qatar living. I have to also say that, yes, we went through some challenges. I have to also highlight that there is a strong will by the government to address all these challenges. We have came a long, long way. I believe the Supreme Legacy Committee that is overseeing the World Cup preparation did a fantastic job in putting together regulations and directives to companies in Qatar, not only Qatari companies, but foreign companies who want to come and invest in infrastructure on how to deal with the workers. Is this enough? We will continue to work on them. And we will continue to enhance. If there is any violation, we will address it. We are very confident in Qatar that if there is anything wrong, we are very confident to fix it.
Ambassador, my last question as we draw to a close. You have served in Washington as ambassador for 3 years, but you served here prior. You're also a graduate of American University. What would you advise new ambassadors to the United States from the Middle East or elsewhere? What would be your kind of do's and don'ts, lessons learned as representing Qatar here in Washington?
I would advise, honestly, for no ambassador to come here and try to spread disinformation about others in Washington, D.C., because honestly, the experts here in Washington, D.C. know their subjects, and it's only going to fire back at you.
Ambassador, how have you been managing, that is, doing diplomacy during COVID-19?
I have to say it has been challenging. I think most of our work is done through meetings. So not to have the ability to meet is going to impede our ability to understand and discuss with our friends here in Washington, D.C. We try to stay in touch, and hopefully now we are seeing things are easing up and we can start go back to meeting again.
Ambassador, we've covered a lot of ground. I regret we're out of time. I just want to thank you again for joining us today on the Middle East. Really enjoyed the conversation.
Thank you, Andrew, for hosting me. I appreciate it.
We will be right back for some closing remarks after this short break. If you're listening to this podcast, you obviously care about the Middle East, and if you do, you should probably be reading Al Monitor. Al Monitor is a global newsroom headquartered in Washington, D.C., with a network of over 160 contributors around the world. Al Monitor offers first-class reporting and analysis from a range of perspectives, and an approach that represents the highest journalistic standards, as well as an award-winning commitment to press freedom and independence. If you haven't done so already, visit us at almonitor.com, check out our articles, and sign up for our free newsletters. There's a lot to choose from, including the Week in Review, an essay that offers unusual insights and forecasts into the region based upon Al Monitor's outstanding reporting. And if you haven't done so, please subscribe to our Al Monitor podcast on your favorite podcast platform. On Israel with Ben Caspit, and on the Middle East with me, Andrew Parasolidi. Welcome back to On the Middle East. I'd like to thank our guest today, Ambassador Meshal Al-Thani, Qatar's ambassador to the United States. And thank you all for listening. And I look forward to joining you again next week on the Middle East on your favorite podcast platform.